Fico, Trump. Who's next? How dehumanization targets political figures. On July 13, 2024, during a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, former President and current Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump was wounded. This marks the second assassination attempt on politicians this year. Earlier, on May 15, 2024, there was an attempt on Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico's life. After a government session, when the Prime Minister stepped out to address the public, a 71-year-old writer named Juraj Cintula started shooting at him. Robert Fico sustained multiple gunshot wounds and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Recently, commenting on the attack on Donald Trump, Robert Fico posted the following on his Facebook page: "The scenario is like a carbon copy. If the attacker on Trump knew Slovak language, all he'd need to do is read publications like Denik N, ME, or Actuality to feel the urge to deal with the disobedient former U.S. president. The scenario is like a carbon copy. Trump's political opponents try to silence him, and when they fail, they rile up the public so much that some unfortunate soul picks up a gun. And now we'll witness speeches about the need for reconciliation, pacification, and forgiveness." Both scenarios are indeed like carbon copies. However, in both cases, it wasn't political opponents at play, but rather a hidden shadow force. Certain overlooked factors now point to this conclusion. The anti-cult trace, a long-standing disinformation campaign, Donald Trump. For a long time, Donald Trump has been the target of an intensive disinformation campaign. Central to this campaign has been the repeated use of the label cult, as well as the 2019 book The Cult of Trump by Steven Hessen, a leader in the American anti-cult movement and a deprogrammer. In his book, anti-cultist Hessen employs the Nazi method of guilt by association and the method of dehumanization. He compares then-President Donald Trump to figures like Jim Jones, David Koresh, L. Ron Hubbard, and Sun Myung Moon, claiming that Trump's presidency bears many similarities to a destructive cult. Significantly, the names used for comparison were previously stigmatized by anti-cult organizations, which also employed dehumanization, labeling with terms like sect or cult, and conducting long-term discrediting information campaigns against them. Today, Steven Hessen is referred to as a mind control expert. In the past, he was known as a member of the criminal organization CAN, Cult Awareness Network, which engaged in the forced deprogramming of individuals through kidnapping, detention, and the use of physical, psychological, and often sexual violence. Despite direct evidence of his criminal and inhumane activities, American media now provide him with a platform to continue his work. This allows him to dehumanize specific organizations, groups, and individuals by labeling them as a cult. Robert Fico. Robert Fico has also been the target of a long-term discrediting campaign. Phrases aimed at contempt and disparagement were used to dehumanize and direct hatred towards him. Below are a few examples from numerous instances. An article from the Slovak portal, SME, with the subheading, "By targeting journalists, Fico poses a threat to you as well." An article on the Slovak portal, HN, with the headline, "Fico is taking away our freedom." An article from the Slovak portal, Actuality, at K, with the headline, "Fico discovered his worthlessness." A noteworthy publication to highlight is an article titled, "Slovakia in a Time Loop. Is our country forever doomed to return to its leader, Robert Fico?" This piece was penned by an individual known for using anti-cult derogatory labels, such as sect. Twice it seemed that Slovakia had finally rid itself of him. In 2010, he was sent to the opposition by Iveta Radikova's party. In 2020, Igor Matovic, with a constitutional majority, took charge until February 2024. In both cases, mutual conflicts among his opponents leading to the premature dissolution of alternative alliances laid a ceremonial carpet for Robert Fico's return to power. Thus, Slovakia is stuck in a strange time loop. Like a boomerang, or rather like the beloved toy yo-yo, its most talented politician repeatedly returns with the potential to seize power for himself. At the same time, he is criminally incapable of using this power even for minor improvements in our republic. And another article published on one of the Slovak portals caught attention with its headline, "Conspiracies and Nonsense. How is the assassination attempt on Robert Fico perceived in Russia?" Behind the official but hypocritical well wishes for Robert Fico's speedy recovery, heard in the West lies the face of the globalist sect. Its adherents, in numerous social media comments, justify the crime and call for the removal of other nationally oriented leaders, especially Hungarian ones. Assassination attempt, alleged motives, and real consequences. Donald Trump. Amid limited information, many have drawn conclusions based solely on popular media narratives. In the aftermath of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, some observers have suggested that the incident could benefit the Democrats, his rivals in the election. Others have pointed to the indirect impact of certain negative remarks made by opposing party members. However, accusations directed at statements from President Joe Biden, made shortly before the incident, are unlikely to have acted as a trigger for the shooter. The discovery of explosive devices both in the vehicle and near the shooter's residence underscores the reality of extensive preparation and meticulous planning behind the attack. In reality, the primary objective for any politician is electoral success, which hinges on securing public support. Physical elimination, far from bolstering public favor, typically casts a shadow over political rivals and undermines their standing. In fact, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump has significantly exacerbated another existing issue in American society: the deepening polarization of its citizens. Many media outlets have already discussed the increased polarization following the shooting. Both Donald Trump and Joe Biden called for national unity after the incident. United States President Joe Biden and his Republican challenger, Donald Trump, have called on Americans to put aside political divisions and come together after Trump narrowly survived an attempted assassination. Each candidate understands that if elected president, they could face a more serious problem. A single event has the potential to ignite social unrest at any moment, escalating to physical confrontations or even civil war. Who benefits from inciting American citizens against each other? Who would gain from a civil war in the United States? The answer points directly to anti-cultism. The documentary The Impact has brought to light the operational schemes of anti-cult organizations and the hidden force behind them. One crucial step in achieving the global goals of anti-cultists is provoking a civil war in the U.S. While the public looks for culprits among political opponents, the actual organizers of these events, anti-cultists, continue to pursue their goals. Robert Fico. Regarding Robert Fico, as previously mentioned, he has also been subjected to a prolonged series of negative publications. Furthermore, Robert Fico has been a significant obstacle to anti-cultists in executing their plans within Slovakia, particularly when decisions were being considered about dismantling the anti-cultist mouthpiece, the RTVS broadcasting company. This point was notably mentioned by his assailant 14, Juraj Cintula. "I disagree with the government's policies. And that's why you decided to commit murder a month ago? The media have been shut down. Why is RTVS being attacked? Why was Mezak fired?" RTVS has repeatedly been observed promoting narratives pushed by anti-cult agents, publishing content that violates democratic principles and advances manipulative agendas. This can still be noted in the preserved archives of the RTVS broadcasting company. Shooter of Robert Fico, Juraj Cintula. During one of his initial interrogations, the shooter stated that he disagreed with the government's Fico policies, including reforms of state media. "I disagree with the government's policies." On April 24, the future shooter was seen at a protest rally. Among other things, he shouted, "Down with Fico." What was the catalyst for the prior decision to commit the crime? Hatred for the enemy or the savior complex. Shooter of Donald Trump. Apart from being labeled a cult, Donald Trump was also repeatedly compared to a fascist. But as much as all of us talk and think about this numbnut every so often, it's really important to, let's say metaphorically, jam the sharpened stick of knowledge into the soft inner thigh of your mind and just grind it around a little bit to try to reawaken the horror of what our country would be like if this hate-filled dingus and his soulless goons ever got a hold of power again. Because, and I don't know if you've noticed, but Donald Trump is a fascist. Thomas Matthew Crooks might have genuinely believed he was saving America. Fueled by what he saw as heroic motives, he merely needed to identify a target, a task that dehumanizing labels and publications had already done for him. Since the media consistently branded Donald Trump as the main fascist, by shooting him, Crooks likely saw himself as a hero saving America. Shooter of Robert Fico. Although Juraj Cintula claimed after the incident that he did not plan to kill but rather harm the health of Prime Minister Robert Fico to prevent him from performing his duties, he prepared 2 magazines of ammunition beforehand. What does his reluctance to kill after the fact indicate? As revealed in the documentary The Impact, it suggests that the program implanted in his subconscious ceased functioning after its execution. What do the 2 magazines of ammunition indicate? That the program was initially designed to ensure a fatal outcome. The shooter targeting Fico was effectively programmed. An interesting point. In 2016, Juraj Cintula published 2 posts stating that no government could protect its citizens solely through law enforcement. Opposing uncontrolled migration, the writer and future shooter expressed support for defenders who purchased weapons and equipment at their own expense to defend the country. Terms like defense of the country Protection of the country and saving the country are noble goals often exploited by anti-cultists. A person open to such ideas could easily fall under the influence of anti-cult programming. By shooting Fico, the shooter believed he was saving the country. Preparing 2 magazines of ammunition indicates his total commitment to this perceived mission of salvation. His aim was not murder per se, but to save the nation from an enemy, a portrayal carefully crafted by the media years before the incident. The image of an enemy threatening society is often defined either directly by anti-cultists or through the actions of complicit media, while the anti-cultists themselves remain in the background. Headline and quote from the article on the Slovak portal SME. They forget that a journalist was murdered. Some politicians act as if Jan Kuciak and Martina Kusnerova were not killed 4 years ago due to Jan's journalistic activities. They try to erase and hide this event, but they fail. The legacy of Jan Kuciak and honest journalism will remain in our society forever. It is unfortunate that 2 young people were violently killed, and this happened when Robert Fico was Prime Minister, says Lucas Dico, editor-in-chief of the Jan Kuciak Investigative Center. Conclusion. Such incidents are prepared over a long period. There are cases where a conscious decision with a set plan, a determined location, and even a potential victim is made shortly before execution. However, the emergence of hatred and the desire to commit a shooting act and thoughts in this direction appear long before the conscious decision and specific plan are formed. There is a hidden force that uses journalists and, through necessary publications in the media, can code and manipulate individuals. Anyone can become their victim. In these cases, either by a fortunate coincidence or divine providence, both Donald Trump and Robert Fico survived. Yet even the anti-cultists themselves do not know who will next fall victim to their wave of coding, whether it will be by sheer luck, another ordinary person who wasn't picked for the school shooting team, or a well-trained shooter. A 2-year-old example serves as proof. In Japan, in 2022, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated. The killer cited the victim's ties with the Unification Church, claiming Abe promoted the religious movement. This case also clearly shows a direct anti-cult influence. Another critical point to consider. Following incidents like these, there are often pushes for stricter gun control legislation. However, Japan has long had some of the strictest gun laws in the world. Yet when anti-cult forces are at work, such prohibitions prove ineffective. This is because the coding of individuals occurs at a subconscious level, bypassing their critical awareness. Political assassinations have become yet another problem in 2024. This is not a problem of competing parties. It is a problem stemming from the spread of anti-cultism. No one is safe as long as anti-cult agents operate in the media. In May of this year, the target was Robert Fico. In July, it was Donald Trump. The hidden shadow force is intensifying its efforts to achieve its goals. Who will be next?